Hello and welcome to the Playtime with Rufus podcast with me, Radinger. Have you ever wanted to work with higher dimensional beings yourself? Then why not join my transformative soul journeys quantum hypnosis training? In 4 clear, easy to follow modules, you will learn how to guide deep explorations filled with clarity, insight, and guidance for others. For more information, visit thesouljourneys.com. Welcome back, everyone. This is episode 23 of Playtime with Rufus, a spiritual and metaphysical podcast unlike any other. As always, I'm your host, Mario, and I'm thrilled you're here with Rufus, Émilie, and me once again as we dive into the second audience Q&A of this first season. Just like the first one, in which we focused on negative polarity, today's conversation goes straight to the heart of a wide range of fascinating topics that we discussed over the course of the season. For example, you wanted to know more about who or what Rufus is and how they are related to Émilie. Also, are there maybe more aspects of Rufus, besides the father, the mother, the homie, and the newbie, that we have not met yet? From there, the conversation flows into the profound territory of the avatar-player relationship. You wanted to know, why would players want to play an avatar game like Earth? Why do they need to evolve as energy beings in the first place? Why would a player ever choose hardship, struggle, or suffering as part of their experience as an avatar? What does it actually mean to say that an avatar is guided, or perhaps not guided, by its player? And what can an avatar do when life feels so heavy that the game itself no longer feels worth playing? We also touch on questions that are both metaphysical and surprisingly human. How do non-physical beings like Rufus perceive us? What do players look like, in quotation marks? Can they have names? And how might an avatar begin to sense the player behind its own existence? What I appreciate so much about Rufus is that they don't just answer our questions. They always find a way to reveal the bigger frame behind them. And in doing so, they open up a wider, more grounded, and more compassionate way of seeing the game, yourself, and the difficulties that come with being here. In a world that is filled with mis- and disinformation, where you need to be very discerning regarding what you hear or read or watch, I personally know that whenever information comes along that is taking me out of judgment and separation and into compassion and a sense of unity, it's right for me and my path. That's why I appreciate and enjoy the conversations with Rufus so much. Maybe you feel the same way. And today's conversation is no exception. If you've ever wondered who is really behind your existence here on this planet, whether your life is guided or not, how to find out, and how to make sense of core features of the Earthian experience like pain, growth, and purpose from a bigger point of view, this episode will give you lots to think about and integrate. As always, take what resonates and leave the rest behind. But first, take a deep breath, open your mind and heart, and enjoy the second audience Q&A with our higher dimensional friend. By the way, we are being joined by the mother and the homie today. And this is episode 23 of Playtime with Rufus, where higher wisdom meets human curiosity. And now, I would like to ask Rufus to integrate themselves into Émilie's body so we can speak to each other again. May I speak to Rufus again, please?
Yes, we are coming.
All right. As always, take your time and let me know when we're ready to begin.
It's all right.
Wonderful. Hi, Rufus.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
It is indeed. Thank you for having us again.
Anytime. And today, we would like to go through a few questions with you, if that's all right with you.
Of course.
And those will be questions from our audience, from those who are listening to our podcast.
That's all right.
Because there have been a lot of questions sent in, passed on to us to ask you. Some are referring to topics that we've already discussed. Others are about completely different topics. I would suggest that today we start with questions that refer to the material we've uncovered so far.
That sounds good for that.
Wonderful. And the very first question is actually about you, because a lot of listeners would like to know more about you, who or what you are, and especially who or what you are in relation to Émilie. We have touched on this in earlier episodes, but maybe you could go a bit deeper into your identity, your makeup, your role in Émilie's life as well.
Yes, we may cover this subject for you. Well, first we need to define a frame of reference for what you call Émilie. Is it Émilie as an avatar or Émilie as an part of the player being incarnated and therefore existing in a different plane as well?
Well, let's cover both actually, because I feel that both will be highly interesting to learn about. Let's maybe start with the avatar.
Yes. So our relation with the avatar is that we are able to communicate through this avatar as we are somehow invited and well welcomed by the avatar itself. In order to define more of our relation to this avatar, let's say first, we are non-incarnated existing being on a different plane than your playtime. We are not individuals in the sense of you are defining individuals. We are more of a collective that will somehow mingle or make one in order to speak through Émilie body. And this is why sometimes you will have different expression of ourself coming through her vessel. But we are not one on our level, although we are one on a different level. This question will be very difficult to answer properly because depending on where you're positioning yourself as an observer, then the answer might differ. Let's say, because we already mentioned that everything may be one on a certain level of existence, but it will also be plural on a different level of existence. Then we believe that the question you're asking the observer is based on a level that will comprehend plural. So in that sense, we are a multiple being entity. But this definition will no longer be accurate if you are placing yourself as an observer on a different plane of existence. Do you understand?
I believe so.
Okay, we would like to make sure that this is said in order to receive what we are saying as accurate. So we may exist as one big energy, but then because we are able to, let's say, find expression of self that will be multiplying in different plane of existence, therefore we are able to answer that question saying that Rufus is a collective of being if you are placing yourself on a level that allows multiple to exist. Yes?
Yes.
Fair enough. Our relation to Émilie, then, will be on one hand part of us directly linked to her player and therefore her avatar, and part of us not directly linked to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Therefore, we could say that a small part of our collective will be somehow what you could define as Émilie player or Émilie higher self, but Rufus is not Émilie's higher self. Émilie's higher self is part of us somehow and participating, and we are therefore linked to her player, but they are not us. We are more than just this player, if we may say it like this. On your point of observation, we would be several entities linked to several different players and therefore linked to multiple of avatar gathering together in order to make a collective able to communicate and to send messages through a singular body. We are somehow uniquely transmitting through Émilie's body. Aspects of us are able to somehow communicate through others if needed, but not the exact same aspect of us that is coming to you. Do you understand that?
Yes. That makes sense.
Okay, so to answer your question, our link to Émilie as an avatar is that part of us is directly linked to the player being part of the player, but other part of us is simply matching somehow the frequency and decided together in order to deliver messages that will be more completed, if we may say, or that will somehow give more detail to some concept that this avatar and yourself are willing to experiment. So this will be our link to this avatar. We are partially somehow linked to the player that is actually playing this game as an avatar of Émilie.
Mm-hmm.
Our link to this player will be part of us is including the player itself. But all of us is not the player. This is a very big difference to us, and we're hoping that you are grasping the difference that it is.
I believe so. Would it be correct to say that Rufus as a collective is, in quotation marks, bigger than Émilie's player, more expansive?
If you are thinking in terms of, let's say, hierarchy of beingness, if we may use that term, or elevation of beingness, because humans love this word, then yes, we are a larger or a higher gathering of beingness. If
Hmm.
we are struggling trying to put this into words, images will be way easier for us. But basically, take the avatar, right, as a flower, then attach this avatar to a branch, and then you have a player. Yes?
Right.
Then attach this branch to a whole tree, and now it's part of multiple branches. Then you have Rufus, and then attach those branches to a trunk. Then you have a bigger, or what you will call maybe Rufus 2.0. You will have a bigger or higher beingness than us, and then continue to attach the trunk to the roots and go on and on and on, and you will have a bigger being in terms of existence. Yes, but
Right.
all those will be somehow linked together. It's just if you're taking, let's say, the flower, it will be part of the tree, but it's not the tree. You will take the branch, it will be part of the tree, but it's not the whole tree. So this is exactly, or not exactly, but at least a pretty good image of how to understand us in terms of what we are now speaking through this body.
Hmm.
We will be more of the bunch of branches, yes. And the player will be one of these branches that is still making the whole branching part of the tree. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And as you say, we are sourcing from the same part, yes, but then we are expressing ourselves in a different way, and we could be multiple. If we are going back to the ladder, we become single. Yes?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
The term that popped into my head while you were describing this was oversoul. This may be quite close to what you are describing here.
Define oversoul to us, just to make sure.
Well, the way I understand it, you have the avatars and then you have the players, and a lot of avatars would call that the soul. And then you have an oversoul, which is like a being that consists of many different souls, or they're like branches, branching out of it. So this may be a term that applies here.
Yes, per your definition, that would apply indeed.
Hmm.
So, yes, you may call us this. We like to say a collective of beingness just because it will show that we are multiple and that we are all gathering in order to create one message. Yes?
Yes.
But
Yes.
oversoul, per your definition, could be applied to Rufus that is speaking now.
Hmm. For those of our listeners who are familiar with other collectives that have come through over time in our realm, could you be compared to, let's say, Seth, Ra, Bashar? I think those are quite popular ones. Would those be collectives as well?
We could, in a sense, it's just the nature of the making of the collective might differ because remember, we could be vibrating at a different level and be part of the same collective. So let's say if you're taking Rufus or Seth or Bashar, then you might have different members, if we're saying correctly, or at least a different coding or association of vibration that will come from different level on the ladder of existence. Does that make sense? We are not sure how to define it otherwise. Basically, it would be a similar way of functioning, but it would involve maybe different level of beingness. Does that make sense?
It does.
Let's say some will be incarnated or not. Some will be incarnated in a different playtime or not. Some will be already at a certain level of growth within their beingness or set of existence that is higher or that is a little lower. It will depend on what makes that collective. But in terms of, is it the same way in terms of branches, bundle, let's put it this way, then we'd like to say yes, because it involves multiple beings that are somehow connected to the vessel they are speaking through and are somehow gathering information for multiple existence on that level that the observer is placing itself in order to deliver one message. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could it be said that one of the aspects of Rufus we are familiar with so far, namely the father, the mother, the homie, and the newbie, that one of them is maybe closer to Émilie's player? Is that possible to say?
We are not sure we could say that. You could say that one of those aspects will have an energy that is more matching or that is
the homie.
Yeah, is easily fusioning with Émilie's energy, but because those aspects are feeding each other from their experience of existence, therefore it's not completely true to say that it's closer. It is just delivering the collective message with an aspect that is closer to Émilie's energy coding, if that makes sense. And therefore, we would like to carefully answer that. We see what you are trying to express, and we would like to say it is possible that one aspect of us is closer to Émilie's growth in terms of one aspect being the player itself, or englobing at least part of the player. So yes, in terms of this, it will be closer just because it will be on the path of growing for the soul that is inhabiting Émilie. But is it closer to her? We are not sure how to answer that question because we are all close. It's just we are not existing at the same plan of existence, at the same stage of beingness, and therefore it could be perceived as further in the evolution of the soul or further in the expression of self that has been somehow divided, not divided in a sense of separated, but divided in the sense of creating multiple part of self in order to experiment. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
Okay, so this question is tricky to answer. Maybe we can try to reformulate in order to have a closer or more appropriate answer. Is that okay?
Yes, but I could also ask a different question and maybe it becomes clearer that way.
Yeah.
When I first worked with Émilie in Egypt and we had this session together, the intention was to contact her higher self.
Yes.
And I feel that the aspect or her player, right, that we worked with at the time felt different from the four aspects of Rufus. And this makes sense, right? Because at the time we were actually working with her player, but I assume that you were also kind of there and witnessed it. Would that be correct?
Yes, it would be correct. Actually, let us try to talk more about this first encountering because this is where everything started, right? So, when you did this with Emily in Egypt, you had the intention to contact her higher self, right? That higher self, per your definition, is just the next level of existence for an avatar, right? So, you're going back, let's say, one step, okay?
Right.
Avatar, then you're going back one step and you hit what you define as a higher self. Are we correct?
Yes.
Okay. The thing is, this higher self can be much larger than what you define as a higher self because if you go back two step or three or four or five, or if you go back all the way through source or whatever, this is still somehow higher self, right? Per definition, higher
Right.
than self. So it is still linked to the avatar's higher self. The This is the complexity of it. It will be basically defined on where the observer is positioning itself to observe this. Because if you are deciding that every avatar you're going to have in session and encounter will be able to dig from the same higher self, if we're going back to source, then you will have pretty much the same higher self for everybody, right? Then if you are coming down the ladder of
Hmm.
beingness or existence, then you will have different higher self because it will be somehow expressing self more and more in an individual way, right? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So the answer to your question will be yes, you met Emily's higher self. And yes, per your definition, at the time you were observing, you were meeting, let's say, maybe not the next step, maybe one after, but you were meeting somehow Emily's higher self in terms of not higher, right? Just closer, as you mentioned before.
Right.
So this will be part of us. We will be somehow connected to this, let's say, two-step up, right? We're trying, Mario. Bear with us. We will be somehow connected to this two-step up, right? But some of us will be maybe three-step or maybe four-step, or maybe some of us will be two-step, but on a different creation of self-expression, right?
Right.
Because okay, this is where it's complicated. Let's say if we're focusing on a two-step higher, you have a two-step higher, which is the fist of Emily right now, okay? Then
Right.
this two-step higher decide, oh, I want to express myself in a different way. Boom, I'm creating two, okay? Then this one becomes one step higher, and then it becomes close to Emily. But this one step higher, maybe is close to Mario. Let's use it as an example, okay? So then you will have, when coming back one step, Emily's direct higher self, per your definition in terms of the next step above, or Mario higher self being distinct from each other, correct? But on the second level, they will match, correct?
Right.
Do you follow?
Yes.
Okay, then this is what Rufus is. So when you did the Egypt session with Emily, you probably just were hitting on one aspect of Emily, and we are just realizing now that maybe this is what you call being closer. Okay, so you were hitting on one aspect of Emily, but somehow it doesn't mean that this aspect that was transmitting was not feeding from higher on the ladder. Does it make sense?
It does.
Depending on what was appropriate at the time for her to know and what the question was and how uh, wise or how detailed you needed the answer to be. Maybe the one step higher did not have access to this. Maybe it was supposed to dig maybe two or three step higher in order to get the wisdom and the knowledge passed on. But maybe the delivery was done by this aspect only. Therefore, when we answer the question, was it us completely? We can say no because at the time, the observer, meaning you and somehow Emily from a background, not being aware that we were plural and we could come in this way and your intention was to get the higher self. But were we here? Probably. And the same as when we're speaking to you, we are
limited somehow by our level of existence. But if at one point we are all willing to go further and then backward one step, then maybe you will get a higher version of Rufus that will come in the same way you did the Seth 2.0, that will come and then speak in a maybe a little more tricky way to understand for Avatar in certain condition and pass on the message. But you see, there is no separation on realms outside. So it's kind of complicated to say yes and no to this question. But in terms of if we're gathering all information and we are placing you on a certain level of observation, then yes, in Egypt you had one aspect of us, not the full of us, because not all the personality were engaged in the conversation, except at some points where it needed to go tackle a little further, and then some of us came in. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes, thank you.
And it's true for every session, probably. If you are having somebody that comes and then wants to reach the higher self, but then have like an open existence already as an avatar and is ready to handle more information, then maybe the higher self that is going to be reached at one point of the conversation will be, let's say, level 1 higher self. Sorry, we're going to put it this way, level 1 higher self, right? But because this will feel like it's okay for the avatar to handle more and it's okay to broaden the spectrum of understanding of self, then it will go and then get like level 2 of avatar or level 3 and yada, yada, yada. Do you understand?
Yes, that explains a number of session experiences I've had.
Perfect. So this is why it's very important when human beings are discussing that they put frame of reference behind their wording. Wording, especially to us non-worder, can be very tricky because you have different definition of the same exact word. And therefore, for us, we need to understand what you're putting behind higher self. If we're just looking at the higher and self definition, it is not said that it has to be only the level 1 step above, right? It is
Right.
just higher self. So for all we understand, you could tap in directly to the big self, that is one, or you could tap into like, let's say 13 level above or whatever, but you can pretty much tapped in different field of existence for yourself as long as it's higher than the one of your avatar, correct?
Right. Yes.
And therefore, depending on how ready the avatar at the session is and how yourself also is at the session, you will have the answer being altered by different level of higher self. We're hoping that we're making this clear enough.
I think you are. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It answered the question for sure.
Okay. So there was a question also like, is there one of us closer to Émilie? This aspect of us that I would like to express, we have a similar energy coding, and therefore it is fairly easier for this aspect of us, so the I that I am right now, to come and use her body, right? Because it's just flowing better. Now, when this aspect of us is speaking, it doesn't mean that every idea or every concept of everything is coming from only this aspect of us.
Yes.
It means that this aspect of us is the one.
With a microphone.
Yes, exactly, because it has a mic, because either like this aspect was super excited to do so, or because it was just so dense to come in, or so difficult for other aspect that we'd simply picked the easiest way to convey the message as well as we could. But the message that is delivered by one aspect of Rufus is a collective message. It is not a message delivered only and created only by this aspect of Rufus. Does that make sense?
We understand. Yeah.
Okay.
Which leads us to the next audience question, actually. Are there more aspects, other aspects that are interested in participating in this project? So far, we've interacted with 4. Are there more we maybe encounter?
Physically, we're not sure that you will encounter. But are there more? Yes, there are more. And there could always be more because remember what we just explained is also based on what the avatar is involved. So therefore, you, Émilie, but also the intended audience that you are trying to reach. Yes?
Right.
So all of those information will be bundled in order to let non-incarnated beings that are required to somehow communicate and that are willing to do so, what or what not they can provide in terms of answer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because remember, there is a lot of non-interference. Even if you call upon us and then we are willing to come and have those conversations, we are not able somehow to give you more than you can chew per your expression, right? We are here to serve, and therefore what we are passing on needs to be fully integrated, at least by you and Émilie's vessel, in order to be transmitted. If we are trying to convey something that will somehow be detrimental to her vessel or be detrimental to your perception or the way you can integrate the information and put it back out, or detrimental to others, then we would not be able to do so.
Right.
We are capped, if we may say, per what information you are able to handle. Does that make sense?
It does. And we understand and respect that.
Yes, and remember, we love that visual because this is the best we could think of. The splash of water. If you're thirsty, we're not gonna throw a glass at your face. You're gonna sip on slowly. Yeah. So this is exactly what we are here to do. We can be loaded with information and we could actually get tapped higher on higher self if needed. But the thing is, it will be irrelevant if this information cannot be comprehended or cannot be delivered or cannot be rephrased with word. Probably if you are able to telepathically communicate, then information will be somehow allowed to take a wider spectrum. But because we are also dealing with wording, and wording somehow has limitation in what we are trying to convey and how it received and how it's transmitted, we also put a cap on sometimes information that we could share because we are aware it would not be received properly. Yes?
Yes. We understand. Let us now move on to a few questions about the players.
Okay.
Because we already mentioned them. And some of our audience members are asking, why do players need to evolve or grow? And I have a feeling that this question is aiming at having incarnations in this playtime. How would you describe this core movement towards expansion and growth? Like, why is it working like this?
Why isn't it the goal of every existence to just experiment and somehow live, quote marks, new experience? Because from our understanding, this is the purpose of pretty much everything that is existing. You go about your day and you live it, you experience it. And because this is going to be tricky with the word Mario, but because in experience you have things happening, even if it's nothing happening, but you have things happening, because otherwise you'll be basically flat or like nothing at all. You would not be able to exist if it was flat. And this is true for every level. Let's say you're incarnated. If it's flat, like first of all, your vessel die, right? You could see it in hospital, flattened, you die. If nothing happened, you're not really expressing yourself in any way, and therefore you're not really existing. Like existence, remember, is a way to express self that has been somehow created, because when you're everything and you're already everything, is very hard to experience something because you're already everything. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So why is the goal to evolve? Humans like to say it's evolving, but we like to say it's beingness, because what you're being granted is basically experiencing something. Because if you are this experience, then you cannot live it. You cannot have it anymore because you are it. This is super complicated with the function of your brain to really integrate that information, but we are really asking to put your best foot forward, right? Let's say, okay, how can we say that? If you are red, right,
Mhm.
and everything around you is red, how would you know you're red if you're not confronted to other existence of colors? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So once you understand that, then you understand why evolving is important. It's just what you call evolving is basically experimenting, it's existing. You evolve a certain way, whether it's higher in frequency or lower in frequency or even stagnating somehow, but you are experimenting stuff. Again, if you flatten, then that's it. You're not experimenting anything, and it's pointless to stay in this existence. And therefore, you're going to be removed from this existence or this playtime. And this is true for every level.
Mhm.
So the goal is to somehow be able to get yourself out of what you are in order to give yourself the ability to experience or experiment or live or being something else. And if you are that thing, then you cannot experience it. This is tricky. It doesn't make sense with words.
I think you're doing well. It makes sense.
Okay. So yes, the question why is it important is because it's the entire purpose of having playtimes, right? Otherwise, just stay the way you are as, for instance, as a player, don't have playtimes, but then you cannot somehow know what it is to experience what you already are because you already are it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. The same way it's like, okay, maybe this will be easier. You know, the same way I will say, like, the concept of this drawing, the yin and yang that you have, yeah? Dots,
Yeah.
like black and white dots. Okay.
Yeah.
If you remove the black dots and the black parts, what do you have in this drawing?
Just,
All white.
yeah, or white or all black.
So this white doesn't know it's a drawing because it's all white. Okay. Now, if you separate this from itself and then you're divided into and you add part of it that is black, part of it that is white, then it creates a picture. Then you can experience being this picture. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So it's kind of similar. It's we're fishing it in the further, but it's kind of similar. It's just very tricky to put in wording, but we're hoping that you understand the concept. So evolution is needed, but not in the way that you're aiming at evolution. Evolution is needed because you're basically existing in a different manner than your player existence. And therefore, being able to do that somehow is getting your player self richer because now it has an experience that it was not having when it was just itself.
Right. Yes. In that context, could you explain what the specific value of the Earthian playtime is here? What about in itself is the player able to experience here?
Are you kidding, Mario? And like this is the best playtime for a player. You see how many challenges there is on Earth. You see how many complexity there is, and you get to experience it from a, let's say, I forget it all and I don't know anything, and I'm trying to get through this, and I'm just experiencing a lot of different stuff from an existence that doesn't know I already know a bunch. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's just like how can we say that? Well, you're born as a baby, right? You don't even know that you already know a bunch of stuff. You're born as a baby, you feel like at first you can barely see, you can barely use your eyes, and then all of a sudden the picture is becoming clearer, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Or like you're learning how to walk. Oh, this is amazing. You're learning how to play, how to eat. You're experimenting a lot of stuff that maybe when you were the player, you already know all this existed, but you could not experiment it. So you decided to come to this playtime and you had some intention for your game and you were like, okay, because I'm giving the shot, I want to experience how it feels to do this. I want to experience this. I want to experience that. And you're going to have that plan. And once you enter your game, you forgot that you allowed yourself to be the game without knowing that you are not the game and just experience this as this is all that is. Then you add a dimension that is out of your hand and that it is extraordinary. And that as a player, because you're a player, if you hadn't allowed yourself to have this experience where somehow your creation exists without you and can think and move and create through itself without you, or at least without your approval, that's what we say, because you have freedom of choice somehow, and because you're able to, as a creation, just be that creation without asking your player, okay, am I, no, you can be this, then this is extraordinary for the player. Because now the player can be a witness of itself becoming something other than they already is, and then becoming and maybe choosing and steering the game in a way that was not at all what they wanted. And this is where it gets tricky because, yes, somehow the player failed their intention, but on the other end, they got an experience that came with a lot of information for them to integrate and to add to their existence. Does that make sense, Mario?
It does. And it brings us to the next question.
Okay.
Yes, we understand that we have freedom of choice and we can very much divert, right, from what the player set out to experience here. But we also established along the way that there are experiences that the avatar will kind of more or less have to go through, especially intense experiences, right? That wanted to be experiences like hardship or struggle are part of this, trauma quite often. And some of our listeners, I think it's hard to grasp for them that there would be negative, in quote marks, experiences placed or planned by their player.
Yeah.
Could you say something to those who don't want to accept, or it's hard for them to accept that negative experiences, hardship, are also part of this desired experience here in this playtime?
Of course we could, but like you said, this is very hard to admit that you would choose this for yourself, right? Because when you're human within your existence as an avatar, in your mind, because remember the ego is protective and everything, you would think that as a player, you would choose to give you the perfect life, right? To give you something that was a bliss with everything that you wanted, everything that you desire, like health and great surrounding and an easy abundance and basically everything that is beautiful in your book, right? And this is how you would think that the player would choose to experiment. And of course, when this is not happening and when you eat shit or when you have like struggle or when you're like have like especially health issue or when you lose people that you love or when you have finances issue or basically when you feel stuck within your own game, then first of all, you will be like, why did I choose that as a player? And also, if we may, you would say, fuck you, right? To the player for letting me be this because this is not pleasant at all. Of course, you would feel this way because you are the experience, you are in it, and you are living this, right? But
Right.
the player aspect of it knows that this is temporary. And we would like to use, because this is also the best way we could relate, not in wording, but in image within your human realm. If you're taking play or movie or board game or whatever, let's take movie. That would be the easiest, because pretty much everybody is watching movies, right? If you have a villain in a movie, or if you have like a poor girl or victim or whatever in those movies, in order for the movie to exist, you would have to have people and actors that would agree to play this role. Because let's say if you're watching a movie that involves a superhero, if you don't have nobody to save, or if you have no victim or no villain, then the superhero cannot exist, right? It cannot do the job. It cannot be a superhero. So if you are creating a movie, you need to make sure that people will be willing to be those victim or those villain, and they would not be it. They will be it temporarily, and they will do a very good job at it. And the best they can do is go on with what they've been given and play their parts, right? And if you were asking in the movie, the character that is not, let's say, the actor, but the character itself, the victim will tell you, it sucks that I've been killed. It sucks that I've suffered. It sucks that this and this and this. The villain will be, well, I have to be the villain. It sucks that everybody hate me, or this and this and this. But if you're asking the actor, it will be completely different. They will maybe tell you, well, when I was playing the victim, I learned so much about this emotion, or this, or the look that people will give me, the pity, this and this and this. And then it kind of somehow fed myself as an actor, right?
Right.
This is probably similar. The only difference is because the avatar is the one living the experience, it has no way to back up from it. You call it like a relativity or whatever. I'll take a step back and accept that this is their game, as shitty as it can be, because nobody wants it. No one. If you are the experience don't want it. Ask the rats that you're poisoning when you're running some tests to have a better medication. If they are liking it, they will tell you, no, we are not, because they are the experience. So nothing we can say or nothing we can convey is gonna put the avatar at ease if they are one of those avatars that have health issue or sorrow or suffering, or that are struggling financially, or that have an experience that is unpleasant to them. We could explain as much as we want that this is not the end, that this is temporary, and that this is somehow feeding their player self. They won't care, and they will be right to not care, because daily they are the one dealing with this. And yes, it is complicated, and yes, it is extremely hard. The only thing that they can do is make the best of it, or figure out a way to somehow better the situation and use their choices to the most ability that they can in order to better their life. This is what they can do, but this is not enough. And we clearly understand why. And we are very sorry for them at the moments that we cannot deliver a magic wand to better it. But we could assure them that at one point, somehow, what they're calling now struggle, painful, misery, and all this stuff is gonna make sense and is not gonna be perceived the same way. But this is somehow their game, and the game is to be played this way. And like we said before, it's just a game. Yes? So we do understand the problematic, and there is nothing we can say or do that will remove that problematic, because the experiment is the one living it, not the player somehow. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
The only thing we can sure, and we can keep on saying, and again, we are well aware that for some people it's gonna sound so easy to say and it's gonna sound so untrue, but you always have choices. Even if you do not like the choices that you have, or the consequences that those choices will give you, or the predicament that those choices will require, whatever. But you always have choices. And maybe the silver lining in your what you qualify as hard existence, or for some shitty existence, or not wanting to live this game, maybe the beauty in it is to take choices, and each and every time you make one, even if it's not the one you wanted to make the one that you can make, and then to the most of it, each and every time you make one, it's gonna take you a little further from the situation that you dislike. This is the best advice that we could give. And again, we know that it's a very easy one to give when you're not when you're not playing it. But this is actually the only truth that we could give you right now. Yes, as an experience, what you're living is not to your liking. We completely emphasize and we completely empathize with it. Okay. We know what you're saying. But at the same time, this is it. This is your game. So now, what do you have in terms of choices? You have the choice to end the game. That will be not really recommended because probably your player will decide to put you back in it. But that's a choice. You would have the choice to just complain about your game and feel sorry for yourself and stay in that loop of specific vibration coding that would maintain you somehow in that little bubble of misery. Or you can make the choice, okay, this is what I've been given. Let me be creative and figure out if there is a choice or a way that I'm looking at this that will somehow, even if I know it's still shit, that will somehow make me feel more okay. And this is what we will encourage somebody to do. There is always in the dark, or in the heavy stuff, in the not pleasing stuff, there is always a silver lining, because otherwise, like we said before, if you have that picture of black and white dot, you remove the black, you have all white and the picture doesn't exist. But you remove the white, you have all dark and the picture doesn't exist either. Yes. So in order to make a game, somehow you have to have, even in that situation, you have to have some what you call silver lining, some little lights that you can hold on to. Is it going to give you exactly what you want? Probably not. But let's say we mentioned it in a relation to the physical layer and emotional layer. We believe it was like a while ago. But if you have an illness, let's say, that is preventing you from being independent, then it's daily, it's very annoying, it's very frustrating, it could be very painful, you're suffering, and you could be angry, mad, and you can feel miserable. Okay. But it could also give you, like, let's say, a silver lining when you have somebody that is there for you daily, that is actually helping you daily. You have that kind of love. This could be a silver lining to look at. And you can make a choice in this situation to only look at the stuff that is not serving what you as an avatar would have wanted for your game, but somehow look at the one that you're having that is there. And despite of how miserable the situation is, then you could always have that light to count and rely on. Does that make sense?
It does.
And what we can invite you to do when you're feeling this is try to somehow, if you are able to back up from the picture of your own life, place yourself as an observer and not be it for a second, because remember, that's what your player is doing. So if you could somehow player yourself, right, where you position yourself as the player of your own life and you're looking as objectively as you can, even if there is no such thing, because you always have the subjectivity involved in your playtime. But whatever, if you can take a step backwards and really look at it and point out, okay, this is definitely not what I would have chosen for my existence. I'm pissed at my player for putting me in this predicament. We're going to take this to a discussion when this is over. But I know if it's not over yet, I'm not going to continue on this way. I have to find something and be creative and find a choice that will make me a little more at ease. Then try to do so and really look within yourself and within your surrounding if you can find those little lights, because they are here. They might be hidden. They might be like completely blurred by everything that you're feeling because of your existence and because of the game that you are playing. But because you do have choices, and we're really, really, really emphasizing it, even if it's not again, because we could hear a lot of people thinking that right now, even if it's not the choices you would want to have, right? Let's say you like pistachio and today we only have strawberry and chocolate ice cream. We don't have pistachio. Sorry. But we still have ice cream, strawberry or chocolate. You still have a choice. Just try to look at what choice you can make that would make the misery a little tastier. Does that make sense?
It does.
And again, just say then done, we know.
Mm-hmm. You were mentioning the choice that avatars have of ending their game earlier.
Yes.
And you already mentioned that most probably your player will put you right back in. So it's not really worth doing it.
Well, because remember, like on your game, you have chronological, you have time, right?
Right.
On other, you don't. But basically, imagine yourself, you're the player and you really, really want to experience that, right? And you are giving the choice to experience it. It's almost like the ice cream again. You're at the ice cream shop. They do have pistachio. They do have it, right? They have strawberry, chocolate, and pistachio. You know you want pistachio. Now, you have a long lane to wait to get pistachio. It doesn't matter. You have all the time you need because you don't have time, so you're going to get that pistachio. Yeah?
Right.
So it's the same for your player. If your player decided, okay, I want to play a game because I want to experience this. This is where I want to get out of myself in order to experience this. Then they're going to experience this. They don't have time on their end. So it doesn't matter to them. If they do want to experience a specific set of information and setting, then they will experience it. So if you as an avatar, you decide, okay, I want to get out of the game. But then when you get out, you play yourself realize, well, I ended my game earlier. I still did not get my pistachio. I'm getting back in line. Yes?
Right.
Because no time. Remember, this is also what is making everything so much harder to comprehend. You have time on your end. Player self don't have time, right? Not in the sense that they don't have the time, in the sense that they are not regulated by time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Because I wanted to ask you what message you would have for someone who is considering ending their game, but I feel like you have already delivered it.
It is defining the light, but again, Mario, like this is fairly easy for us non-incarnated to have this wording, right? And because it's just wording, you guys cannot feel the love that we're sending through it. But we are rooting for you. And we are really, really aware that what we're saying is just saying. Once you're living the experiment, once you are it, it is completely different because you are bombarded within your own layers of existence with everything that comes with your situation, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's energetically, whether it's all the different involvement of your self-being that is with you as an avatar, you would feel this experience. So we are well aware that sometimes it could be very complicated to overcome. But again, think your player knows the rule of the splashing glass. Your player knows the rule that if he wants to serve you water, he cannot splash you in the face. So somehow, if you're having this game, is because your avatar deep down is able to challenge it and be creative with it and make it to the end, right? So you will just have to gather all your forces and really try to find those little lights. Even when you believe there is none, there is always some light. It's just sometimes when you're in it, you don't take a step back further enough to see it. Yes.
Yes. I think that's a very important point to make. And I remember you said this in an earlier episode as well. Human existence is very much about solving challenges, solving
Yeah.
problems, overcoming them, finding creative ways of thriving in what may feel like very hard ground.
Yes.
And so it's not about suffering just for suffering's sake, right? It's about growing from it.
Yes. Exactly. And we could use well, we used it before. Emily likes this metaphor and it helped her. So maybe it will help the other guys too. You have a game, a board game. You roll some dice and then you move some like little thingy, right, on the board. And then you have some little boxes. And some boxes you have like, oh, you fell into a trap. Some boxes you have, okay, move three boxes more. And yada yada yada, right? You picture those game board. Do you know which one we're talking about?
Yes,
Okay,
I think everyone knows that kind of thing.
perfect. Well, imagine. You decide with your friend, okay, let's say we're going to play this game board, right? And this game board, you have a dice, you have some boxes, and then all the way from beginning to end, smooth sailing. Throw the dice, move. Throw the dice, move. Throw the dice. Oh, I won, bye, I'm done. Yeah? How
Yeah.
boring is that? Okay, our points. So now, because you're playing with others, like it gets very much exciting to throw stuff at each other to see how you react, to see what you're gonna do next. And this is what makes the game exciting. And this is what makes the game a game that you want to play with your friend forever, right? And it doesn't matter if it lasts for 1 hour or two, if you lose, if you win, if you lose and win again, if you're trapped, if you get out. None of this matter because what? Because you know it's a game. So it's easier. Try to remember that if your existence as an avatar is a game, you're pretty much playing this board game. If you were rolling the dice from beginning to end in one shot, it's pointless. Pointless. So you will always have somehow within your layer of existence challenges. This is why it's very hard to have one avatar that will tell you, I never had to challenge myself or I never had to overcome something. It doesn't matter if, let's say, what you see your neighbor having in terms of existence, you say, oh, his problems are so small compared to mine. He never had to do anything. This is for you because you have your personal scale of issue and your might be like a little more challenging. Okay. But for him that doesn't have your scale, that have his own scale, this is actually a challenge for him. So what you're experimenting as very challenging upon your scale of challenge, he is experimenting what you're calling nothing, the same intensity as you on this scale of challenges. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I dare you to find me a human right now, an avatar in this playtime that throw a freaking game board from A to Z without no problem or no challenges. Because if it does, the game is done. There's no game. It's pointless. Yeah. So
Right.
this is why sometimes you have bigger challenges or darker or heavier, or maybe they last longer because somehow you haven't found a way to counter it. And on the health aspect, because this is a very tricky one within this realm, the health aspect could be one of the hardest ones to overcome. But somehow acceptance and resilience can also do a trick even when you have a predicament that is very heavy health wise. Yeah. It's just a matter of finding those little lights. And please, we really emphasize this. we know it's not easy. We're not saying it's easy. We're not saying just do it, and we're not being dismissive. We're just being very much encouraging and letting you know that even if you think that this picture is completely black, we can assure you it is not. Otherwise, it would not be a picture.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Rufus. I think you're offering here beautiful assistance and validation and also understanding. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And from the metaphors that you're using, it almost feels like the secrets or the keys to really understanding our existence, they're all around us. It seems that even though we have the veil of forgetting, we kind of find ways to express those dynamics, right? We create movies.
Yes.
We create board games. So somehow
Yes.
this knowledge, this awareness, this wisdom is somewhere in us, and it seeks expression in a playful way,
Yes.
right?
Of course.
It's kind of there.
It's encoded in you anyway, whether you are conscious. And when we say conscious, we are talking about the involvement of your mind, of comprehension and article. Yeah, right. So whether you're conscious of it or not, it is encoded, it is embodied in you. The ability to create game, the knowledge that it's a game, it is somehow therefore floating, let's say, floating in your air, right? Now, you would express it also because you're a creative being. Being a creative being, meaning you're constantly trying to express yourself, creating stuff. It doesn't mean that because we hear some humans say, "Oh, I'm not creative at all." Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Per definition, humans are creative. The avatars are creative because existence is creative, right? You're existing. That means you're creative somehow. You just have to find a way or redefine what you put behind creativity and behind creation and behind creating, right?
Right.
But existence itself is creation. So if you're existing, if you're breathing as an avatar in this game, that means somehow you're creating. You're creating your life every day by choosing stuff. You're creating time with people or not, or you're creating a future or a past within your timeline. So much more than you know is coming from your ability to create. And when you say like the movie, the board game, and all of this is somehow a reflection of what you're experiencing without knowing it, with your player and yourself being an expression of the player and being the avatar and living this avatarness, then yes, you're just basically reciprocating. That's it. You're just, again, being this creative being. You constantly have the need to create existence. And we don't know how to explain that better, but everybody has it in them. Everybody in this realm of existence has it.
Right. There is one more question touching on the concept of guidance. And
Yes.
that goes back to the connection, right, between avatar and player.
Yes.
And we established in a previous episode that some players actually wrote into their, contract for their avatar existence that they don't want to have a lot of guidance, right? They want to do it by themselves mostly.
Yes.
Is there a way to find out? I hope I'm grasping this audience question correctly. Let's say you are an avatar that is somehow not really feeling the presence or guidance of their player. And so they might consider the option that, okay, I may be one of them, one of those avatars who wanted to accomplish it out of my own strength. Is there a way to maybe arrange a sign from coming from the player that kind of confirms that to me, or would that already be interference?
That's a great question. And we're going to make sure that we understand it. So basically, you have the avatar that is feeling like they're one of these avatar whom the player decided, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just putting you out there and watch. Yes?
Right.
Is that it?
Yes, that would be the setting. Yeah.
Yeah. But now this avatar is feeling this way and is wondering, am I really part of that group? Or am I part of the one that is not hearing what the player has been shouting? Is that the question?
Yes. Is there a way to find out whether this is the case? If they're hearing me, if they're cheering me on, would that be legitimate?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the only way to find out somehow is to establish or at least try to tune your connection with self, right? So you will have to somehow figure out a way to get in touch with your intuition. If you manage to do that and your instinct and your intuition is screaming out to you, basically, this is it. We are part of those avatar. The player decided to put us there so we can have basically free legs. Like let's go. This is all on us. And then they're just watching the show. If you are training yourself to respond to your intuition and your instinct and have conversation with yourself, then you will know. You will know if you are. But if you are trying to answer that question without somehow getting in touch with yourself, without getting discipline in training your intuition, without trusting your guts, without connecting as much as you can with yourself, and you just decided, oh, because I'm not hearing nothing, I'm part of those, then we would invite you to maybe, before we take that conclusion, go to the different step that you may trigger in order to try to get in touch with yourself as much as you can and see, once you can feel your intuition, once you can contact your inner self somehow, if you still feel this way. If you still feel this way, then there's a pretty good chance this is it. If you are feeling like, no, this is actually evolving, then maybe there is something else. Yeah. But it's very easy to decide that you are part of this kind of avatar that has, let's go, completely freedom of everything, because the player intention was, I just want to create an expression of myself and watch it go. That's it. Nothing else. This is what I want for my movie. It's almost like if you're casting a bunch of actors and then you're putting them in the movie, there is no plot. Just go.
Improvise.
And then you're waiting to see. It could be pretty much entertaining, because at one point they will be like doing something and interacting with each other and at least wondering, okay, why are we here? What are we going to do? Like, oh, maybe, and become creative. Yes. So this actually, if you ask us, this is worth it. But you cannot know unless you are looking everywhere inside you or trying to train yourself in order to stay connected with your intuition. If you're thinking this, right? Let's say we're an avatar and the avatar is not feeling the players at all and is deciding, okay, I'm the avatar that can do exactly whatever I want because this is me deciding our experience and reporting back to the player. The player is just watching. Okay. But then every time this avatar is washing dishes, for instance, it's hearing the same voice, same little voice, telling this avatar, oh, remember this? Maybe you should not go to this direction. Maybe you should try to think about this. Like a little voice like this that will come and poke him or her. Poke, 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 right? Every time they do dishes or they enter a meditative state where they have like time with themselves. But they will still say, like, I do whatever I want because I have no link to my player. Well, this might be kind of like a redefined link to your player. Because if you're talking to yourself constantly on the same kind of moment of your day where you're making space without knowing it, maybe, and then it's a similar idea that popped into your mind all the time, or that popped into your gut, or a feeling or something, and it's constant, and you're not acting on it, then we would say maybe try to act on it, see if it changes something, and then you can decide if it's, the player telling you or trying to guide you once you asked it to do. Yeah. Because also remember, no interference. That means if you are one of those avatars that is saying, I have freedom. I do everything. My player doesn't give a because you are not asking for guidance. It's also a different story. If you're not asking for guidance ever, if you're not asking yourself, okay, what do I really want to create in this life? What do I really want to experience? What did I came here for? If you're not asking that question, then of course you're not going to get an answer. So of course you can interpret it as, well, I'm this avatar that is on my own and I have whatever, no connection to the player because it's meant to be this way. Or maybe it's just because you haven't really making the effort to enter in connection with this aspect of yourself. Remember, no interference. So you have to request it somehow. You have to say, okay, green lights everywhere. I want guidance. I want to know myself. I want to understand what this relation is. I want to understand why I came to this play and know if there is somehow a specific experience that I wanted to have. If you don't do this, of course, you're not going to get in touch with your intuition. Of course, you're not going to get any signs of the player because you're not basically opening any door.
Yeah.
Now, if you did all this, if you did open all the doors, if you did take time with yourself, if you did make space within, if you did decide that I want to really have time for me to exist and watch me exist and try to connect and see if my intuition are telling me something and this and this and this, and then you still feel nothing, like nothing at all, then maybe it will be more possible to come to this conclusion in our point of view, right?
Right.
There are steps before, because this is also something that we know as humans are so in a hurry to categorize everything and to decide and have an opinion on everything. So if this is happening like this, even without asking themselves, have I done all the steps before to make sure it is this, they will categorically say, nope, this is because I have no relationship with my player. I'm by myself, whatever. But once you start asking them, okay, have you done this? No. Have you done this? No. Have you tried this? No. This, no. So basically, how can you come to this conclusion if you haven't even triggered anything before to collect evidence that this is conclusion? Does that make sense, Mario?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot. So we can summarize, make sure that you're actually asking, reaching out. Make sure that you're actually listening to what's coming in. Make sure that you're open to information coming in, maybe in a different way than you are expecting to. And
especially,
also, yeah.
Especially this point right there.
Right. And make sure that you're actually doing the work, that you're doing what's necessary, that you're training yourself to actually be able to listen. And once you've done all of that, only then are you actually able to make a conclusion here. Correct?
Yes. Because this is true for everything. It's almost like if you have a police officer that is basically investigating without investigating and is going to decide, okay, this is the murder. Right? But this is it. This is exactly like that. If you want to jump to conclusion, you have to argument. You have to show proof. You have to show that you somehow investigated the stuff, right? You cannot just jump into conclusion.
Right.
And it's true for everything. So yes, this is what our recommendation will be. And if the conclusion after all this is, well, the player decided I will be on my own, somehow some people might feel let down or saddened by it, but no, it's okay. It's okay, because if you are on your own in this game, meaning the player is not going to interfere, you are not really on your own because you're building your game with others, right? So maybe you will not have the inner guidance of your player, but that means that you will somehow have the inner guidance of your own experience, which could be very good as well. And at least it could turn out, let's say, easier because you will have one sound, right? And not two. Because sometimes the avatar that is linked to the player with the player plan will be like, no, but I want to do this. I'm feeling this way. But then their intuition and instinct will tell them, well, actually, you are meant to go this way, and you could feel it. It would create kind of like how do you call that? Like a headbutt, like or like a head bump, like so, like
Mm.
it would be
A
conflictual. There
battle.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Right.
would be conflictual within the avatar. So sometimes this is again silver lining, little lights. You may look at a shitty situation where you're like, oh man, I'm by myself because my player self didn't want me to experience anything but the experience itself. Then the little light will be, this is amazing because now I can just rely in my experience that I'm creating with myself here and with other, and I won't be bothered by a little voice inside that will somehow want to steer me otherwise. This is amazing too, right?
Yeah, thank you. That is such a good way to look at it. Mhm.
Yeah. And this is a perfect example of what we meant when you have choices, meaning you can look at it one way, but because you look at it this way, it means automatically you have an other way to look at it. And this is something also we really want to point out. Nothing exists in your realm with only one. It's a duality. It's a perpetual two, at least, option thingy, right? So that means when you see that there is one thing that is presented to you in terms of choice or existence or reality, then automatically remind yourself, okay, if this is there, that means somehow, somewhere, there is another one. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for emphasizing that.
You're welcome.
And we've almost reached the end of today's conversation time-wise. There are two more questions I would like to ask because they are player related and we could kind of close this topic today. Feel free to answer them in as short of an answer as you like or possible.
You did our best, Mario.
The first question is, and maybe you've already kind of answered that at the beginning of today's conversation, but I'll ask it anyway. What do players look like, in quotation marks, if you had to describe them in Earthian terms?
In Earthian terms, well, it will be a bundle of energy in Earthian terms.
Mhm.
There is no way to describe them better than that because you could your mind or yourself could shape it. The observer could shape it the way they want it, right? So physically or mentally, they could have many aspects because you could shape it because it's just energy being its existence. But in our definition, we would say to be a unanimous, accurate somehow definition, we will say it's a bundle of energy
Mhm.
that can morph. Let's add that.
Right. So they can, I guess, if we stay in this context, they
Yeah.
could look differently. They could have
Yeah.
different, I don't know, colors or lights
Yeah.
or shapes,
Yeah,
whatever.
they could, and they would be perceived by the observer a certain way, right? Because
Mhm.
remember, like if we're talking about all this, like the observer has an important part to play in this, right? So whoever is looking at the player, they will somehow influence what they look like. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
This is why we added it can morph.
Yeah. That's quantum physics, right?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
this experiment that a lot of people know about, that observation changes existence. Yeah.
Yes.
Which brings us to the next question. How do you perceive us? When we avatars look at each other, we see this like meat suit, right? And maybe if we're trained a little, we're able to see like an aura and a bit of the energetic field. But what do you see, since you don't have physical eyes? What do you perceive when you focus on us?
It would be a mess to you if we were described it. Basically, it's almost like we're perceiving every complexity of the coding.
Ooh, okay.
So yeah, so so we could integrate what you look like in terms of physical, right? So what you guys are seeing of each other, we could integrate that even if we do not have eyes, like physical eyes. But what we see is basically it's it's almost like if you have a grid and then if you have like coding or symbolics or dances of vibration or this is impossible to describe with words, Mario. Okay, so we're doing our best.
I'm sorry.
You're all good. It would not basically be what you're perceiving as defined as physical as a solid kind of perception of existence. On our end, we would be able to integrate that, but our vision is much more open and is much more broadened. So what we are describing wording wise being layers of existence, everything being exchanging energy, everything being influencing each other, we would somehow perceive it as well. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, so we cannot paint it because it is of our knowledge. We are seeing, quote marks, this playtime with our knowledge of it and with the ability to comprehend what it is made of and how it works. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It does. Yes, I believe. I understand. I'll try to make it a bit more precise and feel free to just answer with yes or no.
Yeah.
I volunteer as a subject.
Yes.
And I'm a bit vulnerable here. Are you able to perceive all my layers?
Yes. And more.
Are you sorry?
And more.
And more. Are you able to perceive all the other avatars that my player is having in the game?
Yes, that's the thing. Basically, everything that you can possibly be existing with inside the game at the second that you're mentioning it, everything that has made you you, everything that is still influencing you, we are perceiving it as you. So let's say the interaction you would have with yesterday, if you went to the grocery, with yesterday cashier, the nutriment you ate, the place you like, all of this will be somehow be you now, plus imagine all your existence before, right? And this is what we will be seeing. It's impossible. Like we're sending pictures to Émilie right now, and then you could ask her after, but pretty much sure she would not know what the heck she was watching. Human brain are putting behind seeing and then picturing and visualizing something that is somehow very defined, right? Like you're able to draw, or you can see lines, you can see shape, you can see clearly somehow. What we are seeing has none of that. It's not line, it's not shape, although it is line and shape, but it is not it is not in a way that you could organize it within your ability of receiving information that will be transmitted and translated in a visual aspect. Does that make sense?
Yes, even though I cannot grasp it as an avatar, I think intellectually I have an idea of what you're saying.
Okay. And on top of this, we could also choose to focus. Because when you see, let's say you see Émilie through the camera, you see Émilie, right? But if you wanted to focus on her nose, for instance, you would still see her face, right? You would not have a big zoom in of her nose coming to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, we can, meaning whatever we are grasping in terms of information that we're collecting, and we are somehow gathering it into what you would call a picture for us, we could decide to focus on one aspect of that picture and then maybe see it or see quote marks, of course, focus on the coding of information that is within the specific area of the picture and have this one becoming another set of visuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Quick add-on question. When you
Yes.
said you were able to perceive everything that makes me that I've experienced, does it also go into what we call the future, since you're not bound by
Yes.
time? Okay.
Yes. But this will be a different picture. Okay, so that's a good question. We will be, let's say, if we're thinking Mario being, right? We will
Mhm.
be able to see Mario being from Mario's existence. But now we are within Emily's body. So first of all, we can see because okay,
Yeah.
the aspect of us that is outside could look at Mario and could decide to take the Mario as a now Mario for you. Does that make sense? The same way we're able to zoom in and out to focus on elements or to, okay, let's say we want to see only that layer of existence
Mhm.
or we want to see that um, exchange of energy between this and this. The same way we could sort out and decide, okay, we want to take Mario when it was today's date, this minute, and then have this one. You see what we mean?
Yes.
Because we are not regulated with time, but you are as an avatar. So
Mhm.
therefore, we could have your full spectrum of information, but we could also have access to a spectrum of information that is somehow limited to your timeline at a specific moment of your existence as Mario. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it
And
will be
that
the
could,
same. It will be zooming in or focusing on this. And then within this, we'll be able to move again the picture and have, okay, we want to see Mario only on the physical aspects, but it would take everything that is inside as well. The functioning, the how it would trigger each other, how it would exchange. So this is not a picture in the sense that you're defining picture. This is why we're really, really much struggling to explain because you have no comparison within your realm that would allow you to comprehend what we can see. It's more of an try to think this way. Okay. If you can comprehend every information that we've been giving to you through those conversations, right?
Mhm.
And that you could have a non-picture of all those information, meaning the complexity, the game, the exchange, the different layers, like pretty much
Mhm.
everything we talked about, and then focus on every aspect of it. This is what we'll be able to do. This is how you would perceive you. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. You're
Mhm.
welcome. So it's not necessarily a visual thingy, is just an ability to have a picture that is so full and so detailed in its complexity that we would know. We would not necessarily print it as a visual art in your terms. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, this is the best we can do to explain what has no comparison in your realm.
Well, I think you did well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the final question for today, and I'm afraid it has to be a quick one,
Okay.
is, do players have names as well?
In terms of Emily, Mario, Rufus,
Yeah, like a frequency, like something that they
they
go
could.
by that. Mhm.
They could. They could if necessary.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, like we came to you and explained we chose Rufus because we were resonating with the vibration of those, right?
Right.
In your wording, let's say. So you could have players that will resonate with names, but it could be also non-wording names. It could be sound. It could be
Mhm.
what you call like a clicking or noise. So it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be a name in terms of wording. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There you go. It could be a name with other elements than words.
Right.
Well, we hope you understand.
Yes, I'm aware a lot of these questions, they come from a very human perspective.
Yes.
And it's probably hard to actually answer them or translate them from your perspective. However, we are humans, we are avatars, and those are the questions that we have. Some of us have. So thank you so much for being willing to to answer
Right.
them.
You're welcome. And those are fair questions. Don't get us wrong. Like, we wish that we could do a better job, and we wish that we can come back to this playtime at your time frame where you have to have it, because this would be so much easier. So we could sense a little bit frustration in us right now. But we understand that it's fair question from your point of view. We would probably have the same kind of question. And we wish that we could really accurately answer to all of them. But know this, for this specific one, if a human wanted to name a player will be able to give them a wording name, like we did for us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So they could ask, basically, and they would receive.
Yes. So if an avatar wants to name its player with a wording name, they can. The player will be able to somehow identify or find a resonance with a bundle of letters that would create a word and be able to carry on that name for a human point of view. But to the question, do the player has a name? That's what we say it could, and it could be a wording name if it was needed, or it could be a sound name, it could be a noise name, it could be an other type of name that the wording one. But it could, if necessary. That was our answer to start with, and we'll stick by it. And in terms of who is asking and needing for a name, the name could vary, and the player could be okay with associating themselves with it. Does that make sense?
Just to clarify, you mean the avatar could decide, I want to name my player Apple, and then the player would be okay, or is it more like the avatar reaching out to the player and saying, what would be the most appropriate name for you, and then it could be received?
Well, if they want to have a closer idea to what resonance has their player name, the best way would be like the same you did with us, would be like, how may I call you? Okay. And we told you, you may call us Rufus, because we're resonating with this with this bundle of letter that create this kind of sound, and we're okay with that, right? So if the avatar wants to know the player's name, at least the player's name that is closer to what they resonate with, the best way will be to ask, okay, how can I name you? And they will probably receive like a specific name or coding or something that they will be able to refer to. But they could also, if the avatar wants to, because freedom of choice, and they can do whatever the heck they want, if they want to name their player Apple, or they want to name their player Chippy or whatever, they could. Now, is it going to be what the player recognizes itself if it was to give a name? Probably not. But it won't matter, because names might be important in this playtime and in others as well. But this is what we say, when it's necessary, because sometimes you do not need one. Sometimes you do need one. And in function of who is asking and how they need to use it, you need to give a name that will be able to be comprehended or assimilated by the other, correct?
Correct.
And so this might change in function of who is asking, and it won't change the player. It will just change what it gives as a name, because it will feel in resonance with it. It would not be the perfect, maybe for them, but it would be the closest. So if the avatar is to choose for the player, that could be a name, but it would not be the name that they are closely resonating with. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
Okay. But both can be done.
Okay. Thank you, Rufus. That was a great Q&A episode. We have so many more questions to throw at you.
Okay.
Basically. I hope you're ready. And
We are.
I have no doubt. And yeah, let's continue next time.
Sounds good to us.
All right. So we will now let you go. We thank Rufus and all other beings involved for the information and support they have given us today. With much love and deep gratitude, we're asking all energies and entities to recede to where they belong. Have you ever wanted to work with higher dimensional beings yourself? Then why not join my Transformative Soul Journeys Quantum Hypnosis training? In 4 clear, easy-to-follow modules, you will learn how to guide deep explorations filled with clarity, insight, and guidance for others. For more information, visit thesouljourneys.com.